Well, hello there. Welcome back to another episode of Photography Made Simple. I'm your host, Audrey-Ann from Live Snap Love, where I aim to help you master photography minus the overwhelm so you can capture the beauty of your days, whatever those days might hold. Now, if you have ever found yourself Googling things like, why are my photos blurry? Or do I really need to shoot in manual mode? Well, you are in the right place because today I'm tackling some of the most common photography questions I hear from beginners, aka the questions that we've all had at some point of time in another in our photography journey. So today I am going to break it all down for you, make it really simple, and hopefully start getting you on the path to better photos today. So let's go ahead and dive right in with the first question that I hear all of the time from new photographers, and that is, why don't my photos look the way I imagined them? And this is the classic case of expectation versus reality. You see this gorgeous scene, you press the shutter, and your photos just don't look good. The colors aren't right, the focus might be off, or it's just not what you pictured in your head. Does that sound at all familiar? If it does, then there's generally two culprits for this. First of all, your camera just doesn't see the way that your eyes do. Your brain automatically adjusts for things like brightness and color and depth, whereas your camera captures the raw reality of the scene, sometimes making it look lifeless or unbalanced or incorrect color, or that classic case of when you see a tree growing out of someone's head that you only see after you look back on the image that you've taken. The second culprit is using auto mode. So if you're shooting in auto mode, your camera is making all of the decisions for you. And when it comes to exposure, it just aims for this average exposure that's neither too bright nor too dark. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's giving you the right exposure for the scene. It's certainly not the creative one. So auto is designed to avoid you making mistakes, not to create artistic images. So therefore, it kind of has this cover all bases mentality, or as many bases as it can mentality, which leads to these kind of middle of the road snapshots, because it's pretty much like picking up any kind of camera on auto, taking a photo. It doesn't matter whether it's the top of the line DSLR or, your basic point and shoot. If all you're doing is using auto, it just tries to cover as many eventualities as possible. And it gives you that real middle of the road look to your photos. Now, even though I just said that your camera tries to not make mistakes, it can and it will make mistakes in auto. It will make the image too dark or too bright. It will focus on something else entirely so you get a soft image. It will get the wrong white balance so that your colors look weird. It does its best, but let's face it, it is a bunch of wires and sensors. It cannot see the scene the way that you can, and it cannot tell automatically what it is that you want to do. So really, to get the images that you see in your head, you need to start to take control over the camera yourself. You need to take control of your exposure, your focus, and your white balance, and learn how to use light and composition effectively as well. Once we've got all these things working together, then you're going to start to get the images like you see in your head. Having said that, we cover all of this inside my Auto to Awesome program. So if you want something that's going to teach you that A to Z, everything in one place, all you need to know, go and check that out. I'll leave a link to it around where you're listening to this podcast. However, I also do understand that if you are new to photography, it can feel really scary to start to take control of everything all at once. So if that is you, if you just want to start taking gentle steps away from the auto modes and not go the whole shebang just yet, then I'd really advise you to dive into the Beginner's Bootcamp. This is my sort of quick and dirty course for brand new photographers is going to teach you some key techniques in all these areas that we've spoken about so that you can put them all together and start getting better images in just a few hours, so that while you're learning all the ins and outs of photography that we do in Auto to Awesome, you are getting better photos. So it's a really gentle introduction to taking control of the camera yourself. It's going to give you these quick wins that's going to help you improve your photos so that while you're doing all the other stuff, your photos are getting that more polished look to them with very little effort from you. So again, I'll leave a link to that around where you're listening to this podcast, or just go to livesnaplove.com/bootcamp. Okay, let's move on now to the second question. And again, this is a really common one, and this can be from people who have actually been shooting for a while. And that is, why are my photos always bloody? Well, there's absolutely nothing worse, I'm sure we can all agree, on taking what you thought was going to be an amazing shot, or would have been an amazing shot, only to zoom in and realize it's this kind of hot, bloody mess. Now, the culprit to soft images can be a few different things, because believe it or not, there's actually quite a lot to know about focus. We have a whole module and about 5 lessons on it inside Auto to Awesome. So it's a huge subject all on its own. And in order to get good focus, you also want to know about other things that are going on in your camera as well. But to keep this really simple for beginners, there's 2 culprits that might be giving you the problem. The first is your shutter speed, especially if you're photographing wiggly kids or pets. And the second is not focusing on the right area. And this is when we want to take control and be able to do that ourselves. So those 2 things are usually the culprit. And in both of those, it's usually because you've left it up to the camera to choose the shutter speed, and you've left it up to the camera to pick the focus point. And this is exactly what I'm saying about starting to take control over the camera settings yourself, because your camera doesn't magically know where to focus. It doesn't do that. And it doesn't magically know what shutter speed it needs. You need to tell it that. And so that's what you're doing basically when you start to take control, is you're starting to tell the camera what it needs to do to get the images that you want. And this is especially true when it comes to focus. Now, again, we do go into both of these things, shutter speed and the taking control of your focus yourself, inside the Beginner's Bootcamp. So if you just want that little introduction to starting to take control, as I said, those quick wins, then go ahead and make sure that you do check that out. Okay, so let's move on now to the next question. And again, this is one that I think all photographers asked at the beginning of their photography journey. And that is, do I really need to shoot in manual mode? And it is a great question. And the answer is, you don't always need to shoot in manual mode, but you do need to move beyond auto and learn how to take full creative control. So think of auto mode as just being the self-driving car. It'll get you somewhere, but maybe not where you actually wanted to go. You'll end up in the wrong neighborhood. It's not actually taking you right to your destination. Now, modes like aperture priority mode or shutter priority mode are absolutely great stepping stones. They're going to help you gradually move away from auto toward being taking full control in manual mode, and it will help you build confidence, but they shouldn't be your final destination. Because when you learn manual mode, you're really learning about how your camera sees and reacts to light, and that is crucial knowledge. There are also some scenes that are just so much trickier to get in any of the semi-automatic modes. You really want to be shooting in manual mode for them. So you definitely want to learn how to shoot in manual mode. But even once you've done that, there are times when you might revert back to aperture priority mode, for example, is. But the crucial thing is, when you know how to use manual mode, you'll learn all about your camera, you'll learn all about how your camera sees and reacts to lights, and you'll know when you're able to switch back to aperture priority mode, and you'll know when actually I really need to use manual mode for this because aperture priority is just going to work against me. So the short and curly answer to that is yes, you want to learn how to shoot in manual mode, but you don't need to necessarily shoot in that mode all the time if you don't want to. There might be times when you revert back to aperture priority mode. But the crucial thing is you don't have to worry about manual mode right now if you're brand new to photography. Just worry about taking that first step away and starting to shoot in aperture priority mode. And that will give you that first step away, and you can gradually then work towards full manual mode. So the next question I get a lot is with regard to gear, and many new photographers wonder what gear they might need in order to get good photos. And the answer may or may not surprise you, but you definitely don't need a fancy, expensive camera to take great photos. Sure, absolutely, 100% pro level photos are absolutely nice to have, but the biggest factor in taking great photos isn't the camera that you have, it's you. So understanding lighting, understanding composition, and how to use your camera properly will do far more for your images than buying the latest model. So really, in the beginning, focus on learning how to use the gear that you have and focus on the light and the composition. And then you can, if you wish and you want to, upgrade to more gear. But you definitely don't need that for taking good photos. All you are going to need is your camera, an entry-level camera is fine, and a lens. Now, there is one gear upgrade that can make a difference, and that is to get yourself a prime lens. Something like the 50mm f1.8 is a really great investment. These lenses are generally very affordable when it comes to photography. They're on the lower end of the scale when it comes to lenses. I mean, bearing in mind you can spend thousands on lenses. These are around they've probably gone up in price, but it was about $125, $150 for one of these. You can definitely pick up the second-hand one really easily because these are a kind of universal upgrade lens. It's one of the lenses that most people head out and get when they just want to upgrade from the kit lens that came with their camera. So a 50mm f1.8, and absolutely feel free to go and get yourself a second-hand model. You'll save some money and you should be able to get it cheaper, but you can buy a brand new one as well. But it's going to help you with some of that issues that you might have, just letting light into your camera and getting a little bit of that dreamy background blur as well. Apart from that, you don't really need anything else. The only other thing you need is a memory card, actually. And I would say don't get the cheapest memory card you can get. Make sure you get one that's got a semi-decent write speed, which is how quickly your camera can write the information about the image onto the memory card, otherwise it'll stop buffering. That's all you really need. A second battery can be incredibly helpful if you're shooting a lot during the day and things like that. And for me, I always used to forget to charge my battery and something would happen and it was like, oh, I can't record. I can't take my camera with me because I forgot to charge the battery. So I bought two. I have a second one, had that very early on, and that just makes life a little bit easier, but definitely not an essential. So all you need is your entry-level camera with the kit lens that came with your camera. If you do want to upgrade to something just now, get yourself something like the 50mm f1.8 lens or something similar. It doesn't have to be that. And that will just make life a little bit easier for you to get like that dreamy blurred backgrounds and maybe in lower light situations. But the one thing I do want to leave you with here is that a pro with a basic camera will take far better photos than a beginner with a $5,000 setup. So definitely focus on building your skills first, and just remember that that fancy gear can definitely come later. Okay, next up, and again, a lot of these questions as I wrote them is like, do I really have to do these things? And one of them is, do I really have to edit my photos? So the short answer is yes, but not necessarily in the way that you think. So all of your images, when they're captured by your camera, are captured in something called the RAW file format. And nobody can read or see this file format. Well, we can on our and editing software, but you can't upload an image to Facebook. You can't share an image with your friends in the raw file format. So it always needs to be cooked and turned into a file format that is accessible by many. And so even if you shoot in JPEG on your camera is doing some basic editing for you. It's taking that raw file, it is applying some basic adjustments like exposure and contrast and noise reduction and a little bit of sharpening, and then it's spitting out a JPEG file for you. So there's editing taking place. It just so happens that your camera is doing it for you. Taking control of that yourself, again, just allows you more creative control. So yes, you do need to edit your photos. It might not necessarily be something that you need to worry about right now. Now, I do know that some people worry that, I just want to get it right in camera and I don't want to rely on editing. And I want to be very clear about what editing is. Edit isn't necessarily about fixing bad photos. It's about enhancing what is already there. Even the best photographers will do some level of post-processing, whether that is just adjusting exposure, fine-tuning colors, or giving the image that extra pop. Remember what we said, your camera can't see in the same way that we can. So sometimes that little bit of editing helps us capture the way create the image in the way that we could see at the time, but our camera couldn't necessarily capture in the right way. So if you really are a purist who only wants to capture what the camera saw at the time, it's not necessarily what the image was, what you actually saw right there in the moment. Gosh, that was a very long-winded way of saying all of that. But what you see there in the moment isn't always what your camera can capture. And editing allows you to bring that back. Photography is about so much more than the technicality. It's about creating an image that maybe feels like how it was when you were there. And editing can be another way of doing that. So for me, I always think of it about having food. You can create food that is cooked and that is all, and that's fine. But editing is like adding that seasoning to your food. That sprinkle of salt and pepper or herbs can make a good dish great. But it doesn't mean that if you don't want to, you don't have to put the whole spice rack on it. Just that little bit of seasoning can make wonders to your photos. And if you want to, if you are a person who's really into more creative editing, into artistic editing, then you can go ahead and do that. Now, you might be wondering, if I do need to edit my photos, what's the best way of doing that? For me, I definitely recommend that you go and get either the Lightroom package from Adobe, or their photography plan, which includes Lightroom and Photoshop. So Photoshop is for more advanced editing. You might not need that at all. Or if you're starting out, you might not need that right now. But if you get the Lightroom plan, you'll get Lightroom and you'll get Lightroom Classic. So Lightroom is for more editing on the go, and Lightroom Classic is going to be your main hub. If you don't want to start with those just yet though, don't worry. If you use Canon or Nikon, they give you free software for editing your photos. Nowhere near as good, obviously, as using Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, but it'll certainly be enough to get you started. Okay, moving on now. And the next question I have is, and this is the final question, what is the easiest way to get better at photography? So the absolute fastest way to improve is to practice, but with purpose. Now, if you've been here a while, you know that I say this all the time. Practicing without knowledge is pointless. Because you need to know the right steps and then you need to go and practice it. So we want to do both. We don't just want the knowledge and just sit there and be an armchair photographer, because that's not going to work either. But we don't want to keep practicing the same thing over and over again when it's wrong. So we want that knowledge, and then we want to take that knowledge and then we want to practice it. So practice with purpose. And if you want, you can set yourself mini challenges. So for example, if you're starting to make that move away from auto and you're shooting in aperture priority mode, just keep practicing doing that. If you're learning how to blur out the background, just keep practicing that. If you've just learned how to take control of your own focus, just keep practicing that. So you can focus on one thing at a time. Once you've got some of the basics down, then you can set yourself other mini challenges, like, set a timer and take as many creative shots as you can, try out different compositions. The more you shoot, regardless of what it is you're learning, the more confident you'll become. So if you're learning just to shoot in aperture priority mode, practice with that. And then when you move on to manual mode, you're going to practice with that. But that crucial thing, you're practicing with purpose. All right, my friend, that is a wrap on today's episode. And I hope that this has answered some of your burning questions and given you a few aha moments along the way and given you some ideas on what to focus on next. And hey, if you are new to photography and you're ready to actually see a difference in your photos, but you just want to start off with some baby steps, then you absolutely do need to go and check out the Beginner's Bootcamp. It is the perfect way to break free from auto mode, get sharper, more creative shots, start feeling more confident behind the camera so you can get some quick wins under your belt. And then hopefully you can come and join us for Auto to Awesome after that, where we are going to teach you the full A to Z, absolutely everything that you need to know. So as I've said, you can find that on a link in the show notes, and I will also give it to you now actually. It's livesnaplove.com/bootcamp. livesnaplove.com/bootcamp, and you can find all about it there. I'll also leave a link to Auto to Awesome in case you just want to dive right in and get started learning manual mode. So thanks again for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast. Though, thank you so much, and I hope that you're learning so much by learning each week. And I will see you next time on Photography Made Simple. And until then, happy snapping.